41 people walked out on George Carlin that night, and the one who stayed, a 20-year-old work-study student named Diane Petrakis, wiping down a coffee counter she hadn't been paid to wipe, swears it was the moment American comedy quietly changed hands. Nobody filmed it, nobody reviewed it. There is no album, no special, no plaque on the wall. There is only Diane and a paper coffee cup she kept for 37 years. February of 1971, a basement coffeehouse called the Rathskeller under the student union of a small state college outside Dayton, Ohio. 91 folding chairs, a microphone that hummed, and a man in a denim jacket deciding in real time to throw away the only career he had. To understand why 41 people got up and left, you have to understand who they came to see. Because it wasn't the man who showed up. The man they came to see wore a tie. For most of the 1960s, that was George Carlin. Clean-shaven, side-parted, sharp little suit. The safe one. The one your parents could watch. He did impressions and a weatherman bit. Tonight's forecast, dark, continued mostly dark, followed by widely scattered light in the morning. It was funny. It was harmless. It played the big television shows and paid for a house. And by 1970, it was strangling him. He had started letting his hair grow, grew a beard, traded the suit for denim. He'd been fired off a Las Vegas stage the year before for language the room decided it didn't like, and somewhere in there, he'd made a decision that terrified his agent and confused his fans. He was going to stop performing for the people who already liked him and start performing for the people who were his age, thinking what he was thinking. The problem was the bookings. The bookings were still the old bookings, contracts signed by the old Carlin for rooms full of people expecting the old Carlin. The Rathskeller was one of the small ones, a college coffeehouse, a favor to a promoter, a Tuesday, the kind of gig you take when you're rebuilding a life from the studs. Diane Petrakis didn't know any of that. She was a sophomore, an accounting major because her father said accounting, and she ran the coffee counter 3 nights a week for $1.60 an hour. "I knew the name," she said, decades later. "My mother liked him, the weather guy. That's who I thought was coming." That's who everyone thought was coming. He arrived at 6:40 through the loading door, alone, carrying a paper grocery bag. Diane remembered the bag because it was strange. Not a briefcase, not a case for anything. A grocery bag, folded over at the top, like he'd brought his lunch. Inside were index cards, hundreds of them, rubber-banded into stacks, and he sat at the far end of her counter and spread them out and started sorting. She brought him coffee. He hadn't asked. "You're the weatherman," she said, and she said it kindly, the way you'd say it to your mother's favorite. He looked up, beard, tired eyes, a little smile that wasn't quite a smile. "Not anymore," he said. "I retired him." Heavy fog rolled in, never came back out. She laughed. He didn't, exactly. He tapped the 2 stacks in front of him. One was thick and worn soft at the edges. The other was thin, maybe a dozen cards, the writing still dark, the corners still sharp. "Which one of those?" she asked, nodding at the thin stack. "These," he said, "are the ones that might get me thrown out of another building." He said it lightly, but he kept his hand flat on the thin stack the whole time he drank the coffee, the way you hold something down in a wind. They filled the 91 chairs by 8 couples, a few professors, a row of older folks from town who'd driven in because the paper said the man from television was coming. Diane watched from behind the counter, a dish towel over her shoulder. He walked out to real applause, warm, expectant. And for about 4 minutes, he gave them the man they came for. A little of the old rhythm, a little of the clean stuff, a laugh, another laugh. Diane saw the room settle in, relieved. There he is. Then he stopped. He stood at the hum of that microphone, looked down at the thin stack of cards in his hand, and looked back up at the room, and something in his face changed, like a man stepping off a curb he can't see the bottom of. "I'm going to try something," he said. "You didn't pay for it. Neither did I." And he started talking, really talking, about the words you weren't allowed to say, about who decided that, and why, and what a strange thing it is that a sound coming out of a human mouth could be against the rules. It was raw. It was early. It wasn't the famous version yet. It was the version being born right there in a basement in Ohio with the wrong crowd. The row of older folks from town went quiet first. Not laughing quiet, offended quiet. Then one man stood up, put on his coat, slow and loud about it, and walked out. "One got up," Diane said. "I remember thinking, okay, one. That happens." Then another. It came in waves after that, and Carlin watched it happen. That was the part Diane never forgot. He didn't look away. A comedian who bombs usually finds a spot on the back wall and performs to it. Carlin looked right at the people standing up, watched them button their coats, watched them go. 2 more from the town row, then a couple near the front, the woman pulling the man by the sleeve. Then a whole cluster from the left, 5 or 6 at once, the folding chairs clacking shut behind them like a slow round of applause for the exit. The promoter appeared at Diane's elbow, sweating. "He's dying up there," he whispered. "Somebody's got to. Can you get the lights? We could do the lights, like it's a break." "Leave the lights," Diane said. She didn't know where it came from. "He knows what he's doing." She didn't actually know that. She just didn't want it to stop. By the end, there were maybe 50 people. Then 40. Carlin kept going, quieter now, leaning into it. And the strange thing, the thing Diane swears to, is that he was getting better as the room got emptier. Sharper. Freer. Every person who left seemed to hand him something on the way out. "One string snapped," she said once, reaching for a way to explain it. Then another, like a guy tuning a guitar by breaking it. And when the last one went, that's when he finally started playing. The promoter gave up and stood beside her, defeated, watching his fee walk out the door in 2s and 3s. "He'll never work this town again," he muttered. Diane didn't answer. She was doing the math the way accounting majors do. 91 chairs, 40 gone, then more. And the number kept dropping, and the man on stage kept getting louder inside, quieter outside, better with every subtraction. The last of them left near the end. 41 people, all told. Diane counted the folded chairs afterward, because counting was the thing her hands knew how to do. 41 out of 91. Nearly half the room, gone into the February dark. What was left was scattered. A handful of students, a couple holding hands, and Diane, who had stopped wiping the counter somewhere in the middle and was just standing there with the towel in her fist. And Carlin stopped again, looked out at the wreckage of his own audience. And for a second, Diane thought he might just walk off, apologize, cut his losses. Instead, he found her, behind the counter, the one person in the room who worked there, who hadn't paid, who couldn't leave. "You're still here," he said, into the microphone, to her. "I've got another hour on the clock," she said. It got the biggest laugh of the night from the 40 who'd stayed. Carlin laughed too, a real one this time. And then he said the thing she would carry for the rest of her life, half to her and half to the empty chairs. "You know what that is? What just happened? 41 people just told me exactly who I am. And 41 people are wrong. It only takes one to be right." That's when it happened. Diane didn't clap. She couldn't have said why. She just nodded, one small nod, from behind a coffee counter, a 20-year-old accounting major telling a man twice her age that he was allowed to keep going. He kept going. For 30 more minutes, he did the material that no room in America was ready for, to 40 people who would spend the rest of their lives telling somebody they'd been there. And when he finished, there was no roar, just that small, stubborn, 40-person sound, the sound of the few who stay. 18 months later, the world caught up to that basement. In 1972, Carlin released Class Clown, and on it was a routine called The 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television. The polished, deadly, perfected descendant of the cards he'd been holding down like a wind-blown thing on Diane's counter. That July, at a festival in Milwaukee, an officer walked through a summer crowd and arrested him for it. The charge didn't stick. The idea did. And in 1978, a version of that same bit, a radio station playing it on the afternoon air, went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. 9 justices, in robes, arguing about the words a comedian said in a basement to a room that mostly left. He lost that case, narrowly. But he had already won the only thing he'd been after in Ohio. He got to decide who he was. The tie never came back. Neither did the weatherman. The man who walked out of the Rathskeller through the loading door was the man America would argue about for the next 40 years, on stages, in courtrooms, at kitchen tables. The fearless one. The one who said the thing. He almost didn't become him. That's the part the albums leave out. There was a night, on a Tuesday in February, when becoming him cost 41 walkouts and very nearly cost the whole idea, and the only vote in the room for the man he was trying to be came from someone holding a dish towel. The promoter, for the record, was wrong. Carlin worked plenty of towns again. 14 HBO specials. Sold-out halls where nobody walked out on anything. And a Mark Twain Prize the country handed him in 2008, a few months after he was gone. The highest honor in American humor, given to the man who once emptied half a basement in Ohio and called it the best trade he ever made. The walkouts, it turned out, were never the story. The staying was. Diane Petrakis finished her accounting degree, kept the books for a hospital in Dayton for 31 years, married, raised 2 kids, told the story at exactly the moments you'd expect and a few you wouldn't. And she kept the cup. When Carlin left that night, he shook her hand at the loading door, the same door he'd come in through, and he was gone before she thought to say anything worth saying. On the counter he'd left the paper coffee cup, empty, the rim soft where he'd held it. She should have thrown it out. It was trash. It was a used cup. She kept it 37 years. On a shelf, then in a box, then in a drawer, moving house after house. People asked me why, she said in 2008, the summer Carlin died, when a local paper finally ran the story. I never had a good answer. I think it was because I saw the exact minute a man decided to be brave, and I didn't have a photograph. So I had a cup. She was 71 when she said that. He was gone by then, died that June, the fearless comedian, the 7 words man, the one the country couldn't stop arguing about. But ask her about him, and she doesn't start with the courts or the albums or the arrest. She starts with a basement and 91 folding chairs and the clack of 41 of them folding shut. She starts with a man who watched every single person leave and decided out loud that they were wrong. Everybody remembers the ones who left, she likes to say. Nobody remembers there was somebody who stayed. There's always somebody who stays. That's the whole trick. You just have to keep going long enough for them to matter. 41 walked out. 1 stayed. And American comedy, quietly, in a basement in Ohio, changed hands. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to subscribe and leave a like. It helps keep these forgotten moments alive. And tell us in the comments, have you ever been the one who stayed in a room after everyone else had walked out?